You're listening to the Retro Hour Podcast, episode 122, your weekly dose of retro gaming news, reviews, and interviews with me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And where is Dan Wood?
Dan is feeling a little bit under the weather this week, and the show must go on, but he has got a little bit of...
Cause I got Pac-Man Fever. It's driving me crazy.
So speaking of Pac-Man Fever, we have got a great interview coming up with...
Jerry Buckner. Now, Jerry Buckner is the co-creator of Pac-Man Fever. This was the first song that was ever made about video games.
Make sure you stay tuned for that one. It's a great interview.
Oh, it's really good, yeah, because it's not just about the 70s songs. He goes to modern days, Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, he goes all the way from the 70s all the way up to Wreck-It Ralph and his time spent working with Disney. So really, really good interview.
Oh, yeah, and we've got some weekend passes to be won as well. So you guys can win some passes to Play Glasgow, which is a fabulous event going on in the Bremer Arena. And that's for the Saturday and Sunday.
Is that June 9th and June 10th, I believe?
That is indeed. And we've got our friend DJ Slopes going there.
Yes, and who else is going?
Kim Justice as well. We've got, I think it's the Glasgow Pinball Association. It's going to be a massive show. If you haven't been to these shows before, they're full of arcades everywhere. You've got good traders' halls, so take a lot of cash.
A lot of retro stuff to be bought, a lot of retro games to be played.
What did you pick up last time you were at a show, Joe?
God, now you're asking. All sorts. I think nothing too big last time, but I still spent about £250, I think. Quite a few PS2 games, actually. Quite a few PS1 games. I'm trying to get a full Resident Evil collection.
Oh, nice.
At the moment. So, I have like Resident Evil 1 Platinum, and it's like, well, I don't actually have the original black disc version of that, so, then go buy that kind of,
Well, I'll keep my eye out in Glasgow for you.
Ravi's going to be there.
And you can enter our competition to win tickets, and it's just a entry competition. There is no question or anything like this. We're just going to pick a name out of the hat. So if you go to theretrohour.com and check out the terms and conditions, please enter our competition and you can get a free pass to Saturday and Sunday for Play Glasgow. So we're giving away great prizes at the moment and competitions. We also have ways that you can support the show. Now, I shared a picture earlier this week, which was of these builds that I've been doing on the Raspberry Pi. Have you seen these online, Joe?
Was that through the Instagram page, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them, yeah.
So it's so cool. You can basically get a build that you can just flash onto your Raspberry Pi. So they have different sizes. They have like 128 gigabyte or, a lot of games on there.
Okay.
Or 64 gigabyte. And you can just get your SD card straight away, write the image to it, put it in, everything loads up fine. All the configurations are done. All the games are already there.
So it's all there ready-made for you.
All done.
So
all the hard work.
You've not got to mess about downloading ROMs, putting them on there.
None of that. The only
all
thing,
done for you.
only thing I had a problem with was I have these Xbox wireless controllers. So I tried to get them working with it, and it kind of didn't detect it with the Bluetooth. But you can just put a little command in on the Raspberry Pi that actually gets them to work on the new one. Yeah.
And how do we get a hold of them, Ravi?
Well, you can look on YouTube and you can kind of search for Raspberry Pi builds because, there's a lot of games involved on them and stuff. So you can find them on certain sites and I'd suggest YouTube and search for Raspberry Pi and then kind of go on recent. But also you can help us because we found this little build your own Raspberry Pi kit, which is fantastic because I know a lot of people have seen these kind of NES minis that they buy and these kind of pre-built devices. Well, this is a little Raspberry Pi that looks like a SNES.
Okay.
And you've got all the items there. You get the Raspberry Pi free with it. You get the SD cards. You get 2 SNES controllers as well.
I was going to say, you get the controllers as well.
Yeah.
And where's that?
This is all available on Amazon. But if you use us, you'll be helping out the show. So if you go to theretrohour.com and click on the Easter egg section, we will have a link to this Raspberry Pi build kit. And you order it from us and we'll get a little cut.
There we go, and that always helps the show out. And also what helps the show out is the amazing donations that our listeners give to us. So we'd just like to say a couple of thank yous to the following people.
Matthew Elms,
Simon Pilgrim,
Daniel Waddington,
and Paul Terry.
And remember, you guys, you can donate in any way you want to the podcast, and it all goes back to the running of the podcast. This enables us to do shows like this, but also to go to huge events all around the country and also get fantastic guests on the show. So please donate at theretrohour.com. You can just chuck it in. It's just a kitty. We don't mind any amount, any currency, digital, crypto, whatever.
You name it, we'll take it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go to the news. And now, the first item I have on the news is Horizon Chase. Have you seen this game?
So I'd never heard of this, and Ravi linked it to me earlier on. And so Horizon Chase Turbo. So just correct me if I'm wrong, Ravi. So this was originally a game for mobile devices.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this was a mobile device game. Now, this is very much in the kind of style of Lotus,
Yeah.
even Top Gear,
Yeah.
which was massively popular in South America. And it's just fantastic. Like, me and my girlfriend downloaded it and we were meant to spend... Oh, fiance, sorry. She's going to kill me.
Get it right.
Yeah, we were meant to spend... kind of 10 minutes playing on it, and we had a 5-hour session last night, and it's such a different game because you're actually looking at the horizon. This is the whole idea. Those old games, you couldn't see forwards.
Like Outrun, and like Super Hang On and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
'cause you had no-
It's coming towards you.
Yeah, you had no draw distance,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so this
So
is
it looks-
exactly the same.
It's in the vein of those games, and this is coming out, or is it already out on PC and PS4
It's
now?
already out on the PC and PS4, and it is around £14, which is not bad on the PC at all.
And very addictive, you say?
Very addictive because you get into that mode where you're staring into the horizon and you're just banging it left and right.
Yeah.
And it's like second nature. But also the graphics are really well done. But one of the main appeals for me is a guy we've had previously on the podcast, Barry Leach. He's done the soundtrack, and he did the soundtrack for Top Gear 2,
Okay.
which is like massively popular in South America. So loads of the tracks on these are like Chile and Brazil. And my fiance was like, she's from Brazil, so she was like, I need to unlock Brazil. I was like, we've got to get another 1,000 points.
That
And
means we've got to stay up for another hour.
yeah, and we sat there and we were just continually playing these tracks trying to get first place. So I recommend this game to anybody that loves those old school arcadey kind of races. I think it would be good in a massive cab.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine, sitting there old school style in one of those kind of like one of the ones which move around, like a big afterburner. Obviously, it's not afterburner, but like one of those big arcade cabinets where you sit in it and it moves about. That would be fantastic. But it's kind of in that vein, so make sure you check it out.
Definitely. And we're talking about a piece of modern tech, but I found this really interesting because we mentioned this before, which is accessibility for disabled users. And now a lot of users who don't have as much abilities as other people would in previous years, in the kind of 80s and the 90s, they'd get a lot of help and there'd be a lot of support for accessibility stuff. But as touchpads have come out and all these little fiddly devices, it's really hard for anybody with disabilities to actually play any modern titles unless they're using a third-party kind of controller.
Okay, so Microsoft had launched a disability-friendly Xbox controller, right? And it's kind of like nice big controller, 2 big touchpads with all the buttons on it. But then the interesting thing is it's got 19 ports or something like that? on the
Yeah,
back of it?
so it has, if you look at the picture at the very bottom, it
Yeah.
has kind of all these different accessories. So they
Yeah.
can be like, foot pedals, stuff like that,
Yeah.
stuff that you control with your elbows. And I've even remember seeing people with stuff that you blow in, and that would kind
it's
of...
got a puff and sip controller as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and this is all accessible. Is this out now then, is it?
Yeah, it's just coming out, and basically Microsoft seemed to be one of the first big companies to do this. I know they were
Yeah.
really good with Apple with the accessibility
Yeah.
and stuff, but I think this is really important to cover, and it's really interesting because as virtual reality gets bigger and stuff, it enables people to kind of
Experience
go out,
these things.
yeah,
Go
and
out, experience
more.
this as well, and not just limit it to one demographic. There's a lot more people be able to play these things and experience these things now. So
And they're all programmable as well, Joe. So you can kind of pick one bit and go,
Yeah.
okay, I want this as my preference to be the fire button, and I want this to do this.
that's brilliant.
And the fact that it's not third party, you're not going to...
It's official.
It's official.
Microsoft,
There'll be no
available
lag.
through the Microsoft stores, digital stores. And it says here it's going to retail for $99, which is £73.50 for us.
I think that's great, and maybe you could get some of your retro games on there that you couldn't play on
Well,
the
there we go.
Xbox One store, and then
There
play
we
them
go.
with these new pieces.
Well, there you go. Well, that kind of brings us on to our next piece. So there is a new game. Well, we spoke about it a couple of times. You guys have spoken about it a couple of times. Coming out, it's going to be next week now.
Well, this is particularly exciting for you, Joe, isn't it?
It is particularly exciting. So the new Sega Classics game is coming out.
Yeah, totally. And we are joined by DJ Slopes, and you've been doing some amazing stuff with Sega, we hear.
I know. It's so amazing to have other people say that to me. Just hearing that is so cool. Yes, I have been working with Sega, which is probably the ultimate dream come true, as I'm such a massive Sega fanboy. I don't care, I'll admit it, you know. So yeah, I have been working with Sega recently. I say working with, helping promote the upcoming Mega Drive Classics collection.
I'm very, very envious. I'm going to use the word envious because I don't want to take that away from you. But that is a huge accomplishment. Even, like you say, working alongside, that's absolutely fantastic. So, the new Sega Classics, is it called? Genesis Classics?
Yes, the Sega Mega Drive Classics in the UK, and obviously the Sega Genesis Classics in America for PS4, Xbox One, and Steam.
So, straight away, my dying question, because I haven't seen an awful lot about it, and obviously being on the show and stuff, massive Sega fanboy. What's the main difference from the last edition for Xbox 360 and PS3? Because I've got that, and that's a brilliant compilation. What's the kind of straight away like one or two key differences which make it a lot better?
Okay, so it's been a while since I've looked at that Xbox 360 PS3 one, in all honesty, but I don't believe the treasure games are on there, which is the one that got me very, very excited.
Gunstar Heroes, etc.
Oh yeah, so we're looking at Gunstar Heroes, Alien Soldier, Dynamite Heady, what else? Landstalker as well. So actually I don't know much about Landstalker, so I'm excited to even for me to try out some new Mega Drive games that I sort of dismissed back in the day.
I mean, that sounds amazing because straight away, Alien Soldier to be able to play that and not have to spend one, emulate it or spend hundreds of pounds is actually pretty good.
There's two versions, isn't there?
Is there?
Sort of. Basically, there's a few of the games, not all of them. I say, top of my head, roughly about eight or 10 or so games on that disc
50 in total,
that let you play different regions.
Right.
So, Alien Soldier has both the PAL or the NTSC version. It'd be the PAL because it didn't come out in America.
Yeah.
So the PAL version and the Japanese version of the game. So you get that, and I think I can sense that it being a bit faster with that 60 hertz, that sort of thing. And it's the same with Rystar. That's a Japanese and UK or NTSC version as well. Streets of Rage 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've heard. You can play bare knuckle, bare knuckle 3 and stuff. So it's original kind of copy.
Yes.
Yeah. So does that actually have all the differences? Like with who the
it's completely it's 100% the Japanese version of the game. Like different title screen. The text is all completely in Japanese, so you can't read anything. But you're playing it how it should be played.
Brilliant. So definitely worth kind of picking up and kind of moving on to the next kind of Jan version of it, really. Then rather than sticking with the 360
absolutely.
version, because of me, Ravi, and Dan, we actually play the 360 version every Christmas at mine, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, it would be this version. And you won't have to wait till Christmas because there's online play.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
I haven't tested it out because there was no one online
Yeah.
when I tried it, but I went on there and it was searching for people to play whilst I was playing the games.
Yeah.
So there's online play. There's loads of filters that are very standard for typical emulation machines and whatever else. So you can smooth the edges if that's your thing. For me, I'm all about pixel perfect. What else can I talk about? Funky borders. I can have like a Streets of Rage Skyline border, or I can have the Sonic checkered border, or I can make it look like a jazzy, looks really good with Toe Jam and L funky border. All these sort of different things.
Yeah.
There's something called mirror mode. So mirror mode is literally they flip the screen, but the controls, when you go left, you're still going towards the left on the screen.
So they fix that. Yeah.
Yeah, which sounds like an absolute gimmick, and let's be honest, it pretty much is. But I tried it out just to see what it was about, and I was playing Sonic, and instantly I was fine with it. But when you play Sonic 2, which I think I've mastered Sonic 2, I've played that game a million times. When you go into the special stages, you're going up, in the left, the half pipe looking thing.
Yeah.
It messes with your mind because you think, oh, it's on the left. No, it's on the right. It's like completely froze you. So it's quite exciting to play around with that sort of stuff,
Well,
okay.
completely love the idea of these new pieces of technology being implemented into the old games. So stuff like online play and, having borders and just having it upscaled even to have it on your machine. It's great. All these extra features that you'd never get if you had the original cart.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I mean, you know, I'm sure they're not absolutely 100% perfect emulation, but for the fact, I mean, this game is, I think it's like a £25 game. There's over 50 games on there. You know what I mean? Including like, you know, the Japanese and the English. I think it's a brilliant little compilation myself.
Well, you're doing a video, aren't you, to kind of explore these packs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm talking about it every so often when I do a complete history that you know has a game that mentions it. So I've just done Alien Soldier, and I talk a little bit about that version on the disc. I've just done one where I've talked about the top 10 games I'm most looking forward to playing on the disc. So I look into, I'm looking forward to playing Streets of Rage 3 because now I get to play Bare Knuckle 3, you know, that sort of thing. You know, that sort of thing. But I'm also going to do a proper review when the game comes out as well.
Oh, well, we'll direct all our listeners to that, and thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
And I think it's really amazing that Sega are kind of releasing these packs, but with cool new features.
Absolutely. It's good to know that they're recognising what the fans want, and that they recognise that there is still fans out there. And also even, you know, hiring fans to kind of, you know, work alongside with them, make sure that this is kind of getting out, that people know about it, and also that, like, you know, that it's kind of being created by the fans as well.
Well, they've started doing that, haven't they? So, like Christian Whitehead doing Sonic Mania.
Sonic Mania. You know, now they're reaching out to these YouTubers, these massive fanboys. So it's great just to kind of see Sega is still doing that, still sticking to their guns, still sticking to their roots.
And going for their exact target audience, aren't they? You know, the people that love Sega.
Absolutely. And not just churning out a repeat of something that came out, you know, on the previous generation. You know, this has got 50 games on it. It's got all the treasure games on it, like Gunstar Heroes.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've had like Atari Classic packs, and they're
absolutely
exactly the same.
You know, there's only so many times you can play Streets of Rage, or well, actually that's a lie. I love Streets of Rage, but there's only so many different versions of Streets of Rage you can play. But now, finally, you know, we can actually sit down and play Bare Knuckle. We can play it in its original Japanese form. So really looking forward to that.
That's so cool. Well, talking of something else cool, have you heard of the Wonder?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I'm surprised actually because there's been a lot of news about this, and it's pretty interesting. The Wonder has been kind of put through as this Switch killer,
right? Okay.
And it's an Android kind of platform that's portable and everything. But the whole thing about it is there's no product. There's actually nothing's been created. It's total vapor at the moment. But because one person made an article that said, it's a Switch killer, everyone else has copied that.
How many times has that been said, though? This is the Game Boy killer. This is the DS killer. And all this is an article. So we've not got anything else.
No, it's
an announcement.
There was a tiny little kind of announcement, and everywhere, all these news organisations, you know, Tech Radar, everyone started repeating the Switch killer. And it reminds me a lot of the Ouya. Do you remember the...
the short-lived Ouya. Yeah.
Ouya that was meant to be this Android console that was going to be amazing, and everyone hyped it up so much, and then Dan got one and said, oh, it was a bit slow, innit?
That was it. It was all downhill from there.
Well, we've got a link to a really interesting article in Forbes, which tells you everyone's writing about a Nintendo Switch competitor that doesn't exist. So
brilliant. So as always, all the articles for today's news stories will be in the show notes.
Definitely. And we are going to now bring you our wonderful guest, Jerry Buckner, the creator of Pac-Man Fever.
Enjoy. Thanks for listening, guys.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and this is our interview with Jerry Buckner. Hi, Jerry, and what was your first gaming experience?
Oh, boy. The first computer game that I ever saw was the Pong games where you, pretty basic stuff where it had a little dot and, you know, it was like ping pong and it went back and forth with the Pong things. That was the first thing. Back then, I was playing in a band, you know, we were playing a lot of local bars and stuff, and they had one of those Pong games, and we just went nuts for it. And we're putting quarters in, you know, to this game, which now is, you know, nobody would even care about it. But I remember that was my first experience with the video games. But then eventually we ended up playing at a resort. This is probably 81. And they had an asteroid machine there. And every break we were going over and playing that asteroid machine. And I mean, it got to where we were spending half our pay on that stupid machine, you know, every night. But that would have probably been the second part. My first time I ever saw Pac-Man was Gary and I were working on some jingles at a studio up in Marietta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. And we went over to have dinner there's a square there, and they have a couple restaurants. And so we went over there to have some dinner, and we walk in, and there's this Pac-Man machine. This is 1981, probably summer of 81, maybe fall. And we didn't know what it was, but people were playing it. So we started playing it. Well, we got hooked like everybody else. And it just got crazy. And we were playing it all the time.
Were you in a musical family, or were you raised in a musical environment?
I was. My music kind of ran in the family. My father was a gospel singer. My mother sang in the choirs and so forth, but my dad sang, was a singer and professional for a while. And my grandmother, I guess, played piano or whatever, but it just came natural to me to play piano. And my dad, I was home when I was about 8 or 9, and my mom was in the kitchen, and she was doing stuff and whistling or humming some song, and I heard her humming it. So I went over to the piano. My dad had bought this old junk, I don't say junk, but this old upright piano, because he was going to take lessons. He thought it would, to help him to be able to play in the group and all that. And I went over to the piano, and I just started listening to my mom just start playing the song, because I could hear it. And she was amazed by that. So when my dad came home, she said, come in here and listen to this. And she made me sit down at the piano, and she says, play that song. And it was Sentimental Journey, an old song from the 40s. And so I played it, and my dad said, okay, you're taking the lessons instead of me. So that's kind of how it started for me.
That's actually really impressive. So you just kind of had that ability just to kind of hear kind of a tune and just straight away just kind of pluck it out of the air and play it.
Yeah, I can hear it and play it. It's just nothing that I've ever done. It's just, something that my brain, is able to do. And the same thing with records. When I listen to records, I can hear all the parts. Of course, that's pretty common with people in the business, especially if you're a producer or a writer. But I can hear all the individual parts. And so it kind of came from all that.
So at what point did you kind of think to yourself, oh, okay, I've got this ability? At what point did you kind of start writing your own tunes?
I had a kid across the street from me had a little drum set, not much of a drum set, but he came over, and we would fool around, and he would, play a little bit on his drums, and I played piano. And so I wrote a song. You'll laugh at this. I did it. I called it, it was Mary Had a Little Lamb, the song that we all know so well as kids. And I jazzed it up a little bit. I called it Mary's Rockin' Lamb, or some kind of stupid title. And that was a song. And then I wrote an instrumental thing called Hold Tight. I don't know what the title meant. That was the two songs that we had, and as a little combo group there, or not combo, but just two piece. And funny story is, a girl at school was having a party, and this would have been in junior high school. And she was having a party, and she found out that, that I played piano, or somehow that we had what she thought was a band, and she had a piano at her house. So we show up, we bought sweaters alike, and we show up there, and there's this piano's there, and the place is full of kids. So we go in, and she says, okay, this is, Jerry and Charlie, blah, 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 play. So we sit down and we play our songs. And, we were pretty well received. But after two songs, we didn't have anything else. And she said, she goes, aren't you going to play any more? And we said, well, we don't know any other songs. Oh, okay. So then they turned the record player on, and that was the end of us.
Was that their one and only gig then?
That was our first gig, and it, it lasted 10 minutes. That was it.
So how did you and Gary Garcia meet?
Gary and I met in school. He went to a different grade school than I did, but then we went to the same junior high. They, fed us into a bigger school, and we met there. We didn't do a whole lot in junior high, and then in high school, he got a Silvertone guitar and started playing some, and got a kid on drums, and he called his group Biggie and his Rat. I don't know what that meant, but anyway, I remember after school they had an assembly, and Biggie and his Rat played after the assembly, and they did 2 or 3 songs, and I was duly impressed by this. And so, eventually we started working together. There was a little studio in Akron, and where we were from, Akron, Ohio. And so we kind of met up there, and the guy that owned the studio kind of put us together. So we started. That's where we started, but it would be a while before we had any kind of success. But that's where we started.
Okay. So what did you do at first? So is that kind of where the jingles came from and stuff, or was it straight into kind of like working as a band, or?
Well, still in Akron, there's a guy that I had met, and he had some pretty good professional equipment, 4-track stuff. So we were able to get a little place to set up equipment and put a little studio together. This little hole in the wall place close by where we live, and we would go in there and work on songs and everything. But I'd stay up half the night. I was working at a music store in the daytime, which I hated, but I had to make a living because I was married and had a little girl at the time. So we decided that we needed to do jingles or something to try to make some money. So we did a couple jingles up there. And I remember there was a place called Nelson's Stag Shop. There was 2 or 3 of these places. It was the hip place to buy clothing. And so this DJ at a local radio station, we hooked up with him, and he would give us these leads, like for businesses, and we would come up with a jingle, and we sold a couple like that, but we didn't get much money. And I remember sitting in a McDonald's. I was broke. I was able to buy a 19-cent orange drink, and I'm sitting there, and on the radio comes this Nelson Stag Shop commercial that they just ran in the ground. I mean, you'd hear it every day for like 3 years. I remember thinking, man, I got screwed on this. I mean, these guys are using this. But that's where Gary and I began to work on that stuff. But we didn't start to work. We didn't start to work seriously on any of this stuff until I moved to Atlanta in '73, and then Gary moved down after that. And that's where we really got together and started working together on jingles and songs.
Well, you mentioned that you kind of felt a bit ripped off with that. What was the music industry like at the time? Were many people getting ripped off and kind of bad record contracts and stuff?
Well, certainly a lot of people did. In the 50s, it was a lot worse, I think, in the 50s. Those artists, I've talked to many of them, and they really got screwed. I mean, they wouldn't hardly get any royalties on their records. They could only make money in person. So it was kind of rough there. But yeah, it was still, even into the 70s and 80s, the record companies certainly would screw you any way they can. Even on our record, they have, you ever heard of something called cleans?
No.
Okay, cleans that was a term used for back in the 80s, 70. Well, they did it all the time, 60s, 70s, 80s. When records would come back, like they say you got a hit and then records go out and they don't sell all of them, so they would come back. Well, they would count the records, and of course they would give you a bad count. And the second thing they would do is they would sell them out the back door to underworld characters who would then distribute them and sell them. And that's why they call them cleans, because we never got the artists. Nobody got any money for them because they went out the back door. And another way they did that is the companies that would press the records, like CBS Records, would have several pressing plants pressing stuff for them. And it was very easy for these guys to, if you're pressing up 100,000 Buckner Garcia albums, well, do 25,000 more and we'll sell them out the back door. And that was called clean. So that happened. So we were all victims of those sorts of things.
Well, I remember when the arcades came around. I wasn't there at the time, but I remember seeing footage of Space Invaders and the kind of craze around Space Invaders with all these people doing synchronized Space Invader style dances in Japanese clubs. Well, what was the culture like when Space Invaders came out?
It was just the whole video game thing was just craziness. It just I don't know how to describe it. Many people said, in fact, they said this about our record, and don't take this the wrong way. I'm not equating ourselves to the Beatles, but what I'm saying is the excitement over video games and our album and the songs and that whole environment at that time. Like the radio set, when our record first got played on the radio, they had so many requests. They had to play it twice in the same hour, which radio stations back then would never do that. But it was that kind of a thing. And people would put quarters, they would stand in line with quarters stacked up to play these games, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, all those. And it was just, they had every mall, everybody had a game room, video, game room. And it was just, overdose, man. I mean, people were just crazy into these games.
So is that kind of what made you decide to kind of write the classic song Pac-Man Fever?
Actually, what happened, as I was mentioning, we were working on some jingles. Is how we were making our living at that time here in Atlanta. And so when we were eating dinner at this restaurant and we started playing this game, the idea came to us that, if we could do a song about this game, and maybe we could get some play locally and it would help our jingle business. That's kind of how we originally looked at it, and we never dreamed it was going to do what it did. But I think one of the reasons for that is Gary and I, we were pop songwriters. We've before then and after have written songs for other people too. But the way we approached it was we tried to write a song that would be a good pop song on its own. But of course, we had to add the elements of the game sound effects and all that because that's what it was about. But I think there was video game songs all over the place. Everybody put them out. Even Weird Al had a game song out.
Do you think this was kind of America starting to fall in love with Japanese culture and led to stuff like, Karate Kid later on and all the kind of Kung Fu obsession?
Yeah, you know how we are in this country. We get crazy on something and we just, burn it out. I mean, it's just nuts.
How did you capture the arcade sounds then for the actual track itself of Pac-Man?
Well, as you know, now, I mean, you can, get sounds anywhere you want. You can hook into anything. Back then, the engineer had to go into the game rooms. In fact, Pac-Man Fever, the sound effect for that record was taken off of a machine in a delicatessen during right after lunchtime. And originally there was a little bit of noise. There's always been kind of a story that you can hear somebody ordering a ham sandwich. I don't hear that, but they had to literally record them off of the games because there was no way to get the sounds any other way.
Is there anything today that you could find kind of like compare to the craze of like the arcades, Pac-Man and, Space Invaders back then? Or is it just not like that anymore? We've kind of like, everybody's kind of glued to social media and their phones and stuff. Do you think there's anything that's kind of comparable to those kind of crazes in the 70s and 80s?
I would say for this country, the video thing was equal to the English, as we call it, English invasion of all the English music back in the 60s. I think that it would be similar to that, maybe not as big, but I mean, it was that kind of a thing. It was just so huge. In fact, we did a show in New York. We had to do a TV show, television show on what was that cable? I forget the name of it was one of the big cable shows for kids. I can't think of it. Anyway, this show is kind of like a talk show. They had hosts and they had like teenagers in the audience and they would ask them kind of like a Phil Donahue thing where they would ask them questions and they would pick out a particular topic for their shows. Well, this one was about, video games and they had invited a variety of people, including us, to be on the show. And they had a couple of actresses from TV shows. They had a couple of dancers. They had a variety of people. Well, there was this group of women who had formed an anti-video game organization because the kids were spending all their time in the arcades and spending all these quarters. And so they were very upset about this. And so they got a little bit of press, so they were all hopped up, and they were going around the country doing interviews and stuff. Well, they invite them in. So we're all stuck in this. And they also invited some of the executives from the game companies, Nintendo and some of these companies. And we're all stuck in this green room, waiting to go on this live TV show. Well, there was, I think, 3 women from this anti-video game group. They get into it with the guys from the video companies. They start arguing with them, and this whole thing goes on. Well, Gary and I are sitting there, and we're looking at each other, thinking, if they find out who we are, they're gonna, probably kill us, because we really promoted it. Well, the funny thing is, they argue, and then finally they stop for a minute, and I'm sitting next to one of the women, and she turns around, looks at me, and she says, Aren't you one of the guys that did that Pac-Man record? And I, reluctantly said, well, yeah. Well, she leans over and she says, can you do me a favor? Can you give me an autograph? My daughter has your record and loves it. Can I get your autograph? And I said, yeah, sure. And they were nice to us. And then they went out on national TV and tore up these other guys, these video guys.
When you originally kind of launched the single, What was the music industry's attitude towards it? Did they embrace it, or was it kind of rejected?
They hated it. They didn't understand it. They didn't want anything to do with it. There was a management company here in town called Bowie Geller Organization, and they had 2 or 3 acts, big acts. They had the Atlanta Rhythm Section. They had Alicia Bridges, who did I Love the Nightlife, and a couple other acts. So they had some, they had some stuff going. So we went over there and told them about it. Well, they let us record the song. They liked it, and we did. They sent that song to probably 20, 25 record companies. Nobody wanted it. They didn't understand what it was. But what happened is one of the executives at CBS Records, he took some of the stuff home, demos to listen to, and his kid heard our song and started playing it over and over and over. So he thought, well, wait, what's this, So they called up and started talking. Well, at the same time, a local radio station here played the song, as I said, in the morning show, and they called our manager and said, "You guys have a smash. The phones are blowing out. People calling like all they want to hear is this record." So that combined together, they flew in from CBS Records flew in and made a deal right away with us. And then years later, several of the record company people claimed that we had never sent that record to them. They would have bought it, but we never sent it. Well, they all got it. I got rejection letters here. I saved a bunch of them.
That's brilliant. So were you surprised at the success then? So it sounds like it's kind of like one of those.
We were just blown away by the success. Just blown away by it.
It was like one of those twists of fate then, if it wasn't for that young boy.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's funny how things can happen. The stars got to align a certain way sometimes. But I tell you what really helped with the record in this country was TV at that time. Of course, now TV doesn't have the same impact with streaming and everything. Excuse me. But there was a show called Entertainment Tonight. It was a big show on at 7:00 at night, a celebrity show, where they talked about everything going on. And they talked about our record and interviewed us and put the record on the air and stuff. And after that, it just went nuts. I mean, we would get calls. It was not unusual to get a call from, 60 Minutes, ABC, NBC, any of these places calling us to interview us and talk to us about our record and why we did it and everything. And it just exploded, literally. And the TV really, really helped it at that time.
Well, you guys must have known your stuff, because I've heard a lot of kind of modern tunes about video games, and they're awfully inaccurate. But you mentioned stuff like the patterns and all the details with Pac-Man. Did you kind of do a lot of research for it?
Well, that's an interesting question. We, after CBS bought the record, then they said we got to have an album like right away. And the single was out in the fall of '81 into Christmas. So we started on this album right around Christmas time. And at the same time, we had another record out. There was a TV show here called WKRP in Cincinnati. And the guy that sang that was from Atlanta. Well, we made a deal with another record company with this guy, and they had us doing an album with him. So we're doing trying to do 2 albums at one time. And of course, the Pac-Man thing we knew was much, much more important. So what we would do is we would go out at night. We'd pick out a video game arcade and go in there and talk to the kids or whoever, or if it was a bar, go in there and find out which game was happening at the time. And then we would find somebody that knew how to play it, and we'd watch them and talk to them. And we'd be up, half the night researching and talking and doing all this. Well, then Gary, we would go back home, and I would usually come up with the hook part of the song musically, and maybe the verse parts musically and all that. And then Gary would take part of my lyrics and he would do the lyrics. So it was kind of a 50-50 thing. And so we would then go in the studio that next afternoon with about 2 hours sleep and record, because we had to get the album done right away. So we did this for a couple of weeks. I mean, it was, really, I remember we was finishing it up on New Year's Day. We were doing the final mixes on a song, and we were just exhausted. It was nuts. But that's how we did it.
You plan to follow up with E.T. I Love You, and you even got permission from Steven Spielberg. What happened there then?
Oh my gosh, that's such a that's a bad story for us. Went to see the movie when it came out that summer. Now, this is back before movies and merchandising was doing a whole lot together. And I saw the movie myself, and I went back and told everybody what a great movie it was. So everybody, the manager and Gary, we all went one night and saw the movie. So we sat up all night, and I had been working on a song. I had a Irish setter dog I loved, and she had gotten sick and had passed away. And I had been doodling around the piano, trying to channel my sadness through a song. And it occurred to me that we could probably use this song for E.T. So we worked on the lyrics all night and did the song. Well, our manager flew to New York and met with Mickey Eisner and all those guys at CBS and played the song. And everybody thought it was a smash, and it was we thought it was a pretty good ballad song, and we thought this will really help us to move into a second album and maybe get into, regular pop songs so we can have, a long career. Well, when Arnie had to fly, our manager had to fly out to California to meet with Spielberg and them to get permission for all this stuff. And when he got out there, he told us, he said that they went into Spielberg's office. He said Spielberg took the record and he said he played it over and over. He said he must have played it, 10, 15 times. He said 20 times. And he said just as loud as he could do it. And so Arnie calls us and he goes, man, I think Spielberg is considering recalling the movie to put this song in the movie. Because he said, Spielberg said, I wish John Williams, who had done the sound score for E.T. I Love You, or E.T., the movie, he said, Spielberg said, I wish John Williams had done this song in the movie. So Arnie said, I think they're going to recall the movie, which is, it'd be unbelievable, for Spielberg to do. So everything, all of a sudden, we didn't get phone calls returned. It just like everything cut off. And Arnie, we couldn't figure out what's wrong. Everything was going so well. Well, as it turns out, Neil Diamond had written this song Heartlight. I don't know if you ever heard that one. And of course, he was a very big artist at the time at CBS and had a lot of, carried a lot of weight there. So what they did is they shelved our song to put out his song instead. And we were going to sue him, and it was a big mess. Our song, eventually, they put our song out towards the end of the summer. And years later, I met this guy who was a DJ. He said he'd been working in California. And he goes, he said, I played that record. We got that record in. He said, we played it. And it was a #1 requested song every night for 2 weeks. And he said, I kept telling the CBS guy, this song is a hit. And he said, so one day he finally says to me, look, man, forget about this record. It's dead. It ain't going to be happening. Forget about it. Quit playing it. It's done. So they buried it and did the Neil Diamond thing. So that really was a bad experience for us. And that fact, that is why we wanted out of our contract at CBS eventually and got out of that contract. We were going to go to RCA, but that didn't happen. But so the E.T. record, kind of a sore spot.
So the follow-up, the Donkey Kong, was that a choice of you guys to do, or was it the record company saying, do this tune?
A great question. No, it was not our choice. There's this. Have you heard Frogger on there?
Yeah.
Yeah, Frogger. We all thought Frogger would be a better second single, but the record company didn't agree, and they ruled, so they put that one out, and it didn't do a whole lot. Of course, how do you follow a record like Pac-Man that's so huge? But I think the Frogger, a lot of people still like Frogger, and I think it would have done a lot better, but that was not our choice. Yeah, Frogger was our choice.
So during this time, obviously you mentioned, in talks with Steven Spielberg, etc. During this time, did you and Gary meet a lot of famous people, or was it kind of like the management who got to meet them and stuff? Or
we got to meet a lot of people. There was a guy that had hits back in the 50s called Freddie Boom Boom Cannon. Have you ever heard of that guy?
No, never heard of that one.
Okay, yeah, it's probably way past you guys. Well, Freddie had a bunch of hits, Palisades Park and Transistor Sister. He had a ton of big records in the 50s. Well, he came to Atlanta, he was in his 60s at the time, but he was working with Frankie Avalon. You probably heard of Frankie Avalon. It was Frankie and Freddie and a couple guys. Anyway, they came to the Fox Theater here to do some shows, and Freddie Cannon called our management company and said, I really would like to meet those guys. So we really didn't know why, but it was a big deal to us because we had, as you know, we were kids, but we remembered his records. So to us, it was kind of a big deal to meet him. So we went down to meet him, and I'll never forget, we're all backstage, and we were also with a guy named Tommy Rowe. Tommy was with the Beatles. You remember Tommy? You might have heard that song or that name. You remember Tommy Rowe?
Yeah, I heard. Was he the guy that was meant to be the fifth Beatle? Or
Yeah, he was. He toured with the Beatles before they hit here. He tried to get a company here in town to sign them, and the company in town didn't do it. Big mistake. Big mistake. But Tommy was there too. Anyway, we're backstage, and Freddie's saying to us, he goes, "Hey man," he said, "I could have done that record. That could have been a hit for me." And we're thinking, well, yeah, I mean, you know, back in the '50s, but I mean that's not going to be a hit for you, you know. I mean, you know. Well, anyway, the funny thing is, he said, you know, we were all going to go get something to eat, and he goes, "Well, wait a minute, I got to find Frankie and get my money." And he's chasing Frankie Avalon down the street to get his money. It was like, you know, like you guys are supposed to be professional, you know, it's like a bunch of guys playing out of a bar band or something. But, yeah, we worked with Huey Lewis. We worked with Shana Easton. We worked with, you know, got to meet. Shana was at the Beverly Hills Hotel. We were staying there. We did a bunch of shows in California. And she had her door cracked open and was in kind of singing and warming up, you know. So we were talking to her, and you know, she was doing some of the American Bandstand shows. But yeah, we did. You know, we got to meet a lot of different people. It was fun.
I also hear you got to meet the inventor of Pac-Man as well.
Oh boy, now that was an experience. That happened just a couple of years ago in Chicago, and there was a 35th anniversary big deal because Nintendo was out of Chicago, and they had us come up there, so we did. Anyway, he was there, and they had a film crew with them from Japan. They were filming the whole thing. Well, he could not speak hardly any English, but we were actually played a little bit of a show there. They had us play a little bit of the song and stuff, and we had a kind of a half video, half live thing. Anyway, he shows up on the dance floor out there dancing, you know, dancing around. And so later on, we had to do a question and answer thing, sitting, you know, people can ask us questions.
Yeah, like a Q&A.
Q&A, thanks. And anyway, he's standing next to me. We're waiting to go into this room to, you know, go up on stage and do this. And he turns to me and he goes, you know, we shook hands, and I told him, I said, what a pleasure to meet you and all that. And he leans over into my ear and he goes, "Pac-Man Fever, I got the fever." But, you know, started singing the song. You know, he knew enough English words to do that. But he couldn't have been nicer, and it was a thrill. I've got a picture here that we took together, and he signed it and drew some little Pac-Man and stuff on there, and I cherish it. It's pretty neat. Very nice guy. He was a very nice guy.
That's awesome. So many of your songs are included in the Rock Band lineup. What did you think of that concept when it first came about?
I didn't think a lot about it. I was glad that they used our stuff. You know, I mean, we're always glad to get our stuff out there. I thought it was, you know, fun, I guess, for people to do. You know, I didn't really try to do much with it. But the guy running it was a nice guy, and probably paid us too much money. But he was a good guy. In fact, he hasn't sent me a royalty check in several years, but I haven't said anything because he paid us so much up front. So I figure we're about even, probably.
Well, when you got approached for Wreck-It Ralph, what did you think about that? And I think it was fantastic that you credited Gary as well in the music for it.
Yeah, very sad time for me. Gary passed away in 2011. My mother passed away the same year. It was a tough year. And I got a call one day, and the guy says, "Hi, I'm Tom McDougal. I'm with Disney. I'm music director at Disney, and we have a movie coming out called Wreck-It Ralph, and we have this song that we would like you guys to do if you would do it." And I'm thinking, yeah, no, I don't want to do a Disney movie. You know, yeah. He said they were gonna have somebody in a movie do it. Some character, but it didn't work out. And then Tom said, "I thought about you guys," and I thought, wait a minute, we should have you guys do it. Plus, it would help with promoting the movie and everything. So they sent me. There was a guy that had already written the song and did a little demo, and he said, "I'm going to send you this and listen to it and tell me whatever." So I got it, and of course we worked on it and changed some of the lyrics and made changes to it and everything. And so they sent their producer in to work with me on the production of it, and so we did it, and I think it came out really good. I thought it sounded pretty good, and I wanted to, as you say, I wanted to include Gary, and so what we did is in Pac-Man Fever, there's a spot where he goes, huh, on a guitar. I think it's a guitar. So we took that little huh and we put it in Wreck-It Ralph, so he's in that record.
Well, I think Wreck-It Ralph was one of the films where they really got it right. The kind of having Walter Day references in there and all the kind of history of arcades, and you guys, they seem to get all the references correct.
Yeah, poor Walter. I think they really screwed him. I mean, it's obvious that he's the guy.
It is. Yeah.
And they didn't pay him anything. I mean, Walter. Obviously you've met Walter.
Oh yeah, we've had him on the cast. He's excellent.
And he's just the nicest man. Just such a nice-hearted man. He's become a very good friend. Just like Billy's, become a very good friend. I hate seeing Billy Mitchell. I hate seeing what's happened to him. It's really been unfair, I think.
Yeah, we've tried to report evenly on it and kind of wait till facts come out and all of this stuff,
I mean, I've worked a lot of shows with Billy, got to know him really well, and I tell you, he is a very nice man. He is not the kind of person that would do something like, be a cheater. I just don't believe that. He does have, in the movie, he had kind of made, he kind of became a character in the movie. And he kind of has a character thing when he's live, but he behind the scenes is very, is a very nice guy. I remember we were in, I think it was Chicago. We were all having dinner in this restaurant, and some kid wanted an autograph. I think he had some sort of physical problem or something, and his parents were there. And Billy gets up from the table. We're in the middle of the meal. Gets up from the table, goes over out of the restaurant to the other side of the restaurant and sits down with this kid and signs his stuff, talks to him, and just spent time with him. And I was amazed by that, that he would do that. And he's just that kind of a guy. He has a big heart, and very nice to the people around him. He always has time for everybody. So it's just really a shame.
I think especially in this kind of time of social media, the pressure with stuff like that, it comes on like 10 or 20-fold as well. It's really.
You know who Joel West is? Joel is actually a record holder of I forget what the game it is, but he's Billy's manager. And Joel and I became friends a couple of years ago. And Joel knows everybody in the business and knows where all the bodies are buried. But the problem was there was some guy in Canada that just has a thing against Billy and has for several years. And then they were able to come up with this way of, and then Jace Hall, he's involved in it. And the sad thing is the video that was originally done, nobody has it. They can't find it. So all they had to go on was copies that could have easily been doctored. And so it's really been unfair for all this stuff to happen. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of a mad thing to look at it retro as well. Kind of something that happened so many years ago, and people are still investigating it and still.
But nobody's done more for the business, I think, than Walter Day and of course Billy. The two of them, they've done a lot for retro, and I love them. They're great. They're great guys and great friends. You know who Richie Knuckles is?
Yeah.
Richie's another good friend. I love Richie, and we've done some stuff. In fact, he recorded our song, some kind of a crazy version that he did with some friends or whatever. But it was cool. But I love Richie. He's a great guy. Those three guys are really good friends. I love them.
Well, recently, have you seen a kind of increase in nostalgia and more interest in your tunes in recent years?
Oh yeah, it's nuts. We had right before Christmas two big TV shows here, and I won't be able to remember the names. Family Guy was one of them, and
I think it was South Park.
South Park, yeah, those two shows. they paid us a good deal of money to use the song in there, and the video game places are just popping up everywhere all of a sudden. I mean, I have Google alerts for stuff, keep track of our stuff and what's going on, and I mean they're just coming up everywhere. In fact, we're about to release a T-shirt line, and I wanted to mention it to you guys. And it's going to be T-shirts. It's going to have the album on the front. You know, it's going to have the screen, the Pac-Man screen, and then we're going to include some of the lyrics. Like one of them will be, "I got a pocket full of quarters headed to the arcade." That would be underneath the screen, Pac-Man machine thing on the T-shirt. But we're going to do several of them with different lyrics, and then we're going to do some with promotion pictures. But yeah, people are. I've got friends who have opened arcades, and they're doing very well with them. And it's just become huge. I mean, I don't know how long it'll last, but it's huge, and we're getting a lot of airplay now on satellite radio and regular radio. So yeah, it's picking up. It's kind of neat, kind of fun.
That's really good to hear, because obviously we're massive retro game and retro enthusiasts, so that's great to hear that it's kind of still, happening on the other side of the pond as well. So are your albums still available, and where can our listeners kind of get a hold of them, listen to them, buy them?
iTunes, and they're also, I mean, YouTube. Everything is up on YouTube, so you can hear pretty much what you want. And we did a new song called Old School Games, but we're going to redo it. We're going to redo a second version. I just want to redo it. I want to do it a different way, and that hopefully will get released in the next couple of months. And we got some other things happening, some merchandising things or whatever. But at the moment, that's kind of what's going on. But yeah, you never know who's gonna. The song's been they've used it on the Tonight Show. They've used it. On the Goldbergs, which is a big 80s TV show here.
Yeah, we have that over here as well. That's on every day.
Oh, you guys see this? I forget that, I guess you see everything we see now.
Yeah, it's not like it was back then, was it?
Where we no regional programming, yeah.
But no, we get it all now. So yeah, the Goldbergs is on every day.
Do you guys have Netflix and stuff like that over there?
Yeah, we have it all.
Yeah, Amazon
phones,
Prime.
Amazon.
Oh, okay. So you get to see all those shows, Breaking Bad and all that stuff?
Yeah, we get them all. We get, like The Walking Dead and everything. We now just get it a day later.
Yeah. We had there was a show, some show, it was a big show on cable. These two guys, I can't think of the name of the show. My granddaughter watched it a lot. They were something about angels and stuff, and they were driving around in a cool car and stuff. Anyway, they did a show, and it was called Pac-Man Fever, the show.
Oh, really? Was it Supernatural?
I mean, they didn't play the song because they didn't want to have to pay the license fee. But yeah, we're showing up in a lot of places now, and it's it's kind of exciting. I mean, we've really become a part of pop culture, and that's fine with me. I enjoy it. People like to meet me and talk, and I like to share the stories. And it's like people will come up, and that was such a time that was so ingrained in their minds. A certain age group, that went through that. And, they just want to talk about, oh, yeah, we met during that time and your song. I remember we had Casey Kasem doing his American Top 40 Countdown show. He had a thing he would do every week where it was some kind of request thing where people, and this girl said that she had met some guy in an arcade and they split up and she doesn't know where he is, but wherever he is, I'm dedicating this song. And it was our song. Long distance dedication, that's what they called it. And usually those songs were like ballads, and so it was so funny to hear that on there. But I think it just, it's kind of one of those things where people, that time period, we just kind of represent, tied in with the video game thing, and people just, they love to live in, they love to live their past, and they got money now to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Jerry, for talking to us today. We'd like to thank you and Gary for just making some fantastic music.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I enjoyed it and love talking to you guys.